Face, are you with us? Why am I echoing? You there, Chad?
I am here. How's everybody doing? Can you all hear me okay?
I can now. Yep.
Okay, all right.
Because we may need to press you into service, young man.
It's been a while.
I know. I know. Think you're up to it?
There's some rust I'd have to shake off, but we'll do it.
You better start shaking. In a prior incarnation, I would have gone ahead and gotten us started, but Helene Brazier reminded me one time when I tried to start a meeting early that if it's posted for 1 o'clock,
Can't start before 1.
got to start it at 1 o'clock. So salute the flag, right?
Anyone have Bill's number? We could text them. I think I actually do. It's 858-462-0122. Do you have it memorized?
On the board for a while, yeah.
That's impressive. Nobody memorizes phone numbers anymore.
It's my parent.
Remember, we used to have to. Yes,
No one
all
even
of us used to have to do, right?
no one even listens to phone messages anymore.
No, that's true too.
They just see that you called and they don't even notice that there's a message. And so then they call you back. Then you have to repeat everything you said in the message.
I read them.
I find that frustrating. Find that a little
Transcription.
frustrating at times.
It was.
I had it. I'm not good then.
Man, it's really unlike Pete to miss. Pete is just as regular as it, clockwork. I mean, the boy is just always here.
I'm sure he misses us.
Oh, he must.
Yeah.
Yeah. How could you not?
I'm with finance. Come on.
Uh-huh. I know. Pete's an accountant.
I don't think I have Pete's number.
Thank you, Roberto.
Quick work today.
Man, it went quick.
Get ready for the little one. Hey, do it with your seat. We're gonna pothole the rest of the street. So basically there's a saddle that goes around a pipe. The strap rusted off. We're gonna go look at all the other ones. And probably end up replacing them, but we'll schedule them. We'll do it at night time so less people know the wire outage. And then just do them all in one shot. Be done with it.
Well, I certainly appreciate how fast it went today. I guess you didn't have too much trouble filling that 20-inch pipe, huh? Good, good,
Impressive, really.
beautiful. Okay, it is 1 o'clock, so we're going to spool this thing up. So we'll call it to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And roll call. Flint Nelson is here. Bill Stewart, nope. Peter Hensley, nope. Patty Townsend Smith.
Here.
Chad Williams,
Here,
okay. And do I need to do all the number 4 stuff, the reading aloud? Do we have anybody?
We have no members.
We have no one. Beautiful. Skip that. We'll go to seating of alternates. Chad, we need you for a quorum.
happy to help.
Okay. Now, just in case Bill or Pete arrives, Dawn, if we have seated Chad, does he stay seated if we get another member and we end up with a quorum without Chad?
I don't think so. I don't think you would stay seated, that we would just note that they arrived at a certain time in the meeting and then we just
Okay.
take the vote without chat.
All right, just wanted to check. Okay, item 6, additions, deletions, and amendments to the agenda. As always, I'll start with the staff. Do you guys have anything you want to,
No changes.
no changes? Patty, you got anything?
No.
I don't either. Do we have any public comment?
We have no members of.
We did not receive any written comments.
Okay. All right, item 8, approval of minutes. All of you received in your packet the minutes that Dawn and her team thoughtfully prepared. Are there any suggested changes or corrections to the minutes? And if not, I'm looking for a motion.
I will make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Looking for a second.
Second.
Okay, Patty seconds. So Chad moves, Chad and Patty seconds a motion to approve. Because Chad is remote, do we have to do a roll call?
Yes.
Okay, please do.
Member Nelson,
Aye.
member Townsend Smith,
Aye.
and alternate Williams.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, minutes are unanimously approved. Item 9, this is a happy one. Introduction of new general manager and general manager comments. Jake.
Yes, thank you. Glad to be here. This is my second committee meeting, and I think Tracy's got some really good stuff for us today. A lot of good information. A couple of things. Just wanted to, bring this committee up to speed on. You probably saw as you were walking in the ballot box. So there is an election happening. Obviously, the district cannot advocate as far as the election goes. But it is happening, and for those of us that live in the district, you probably got your notification and your sample ballot. Oh, you haven't yet? Okay, I got mine. But anyway, so those are all out. It has, there's a lot going on with staff too, as far as that goes. We have a requirement for, this is part of the County Water Act, that we notice everyone of this election. So we actually have to do our own notice. Those are being prepared now. It's pretty benign. It really is just a notice. This is happening. But there's a lot of them that have to go out. It goes out to every registered voter, so that we have about 18,000 in our service area. That doesn't include Fallbrook. Fallbrook has to do their own. And of course, working on finances and all the different things that are associated with that. So, and a pump station project and different things. So a lot going on related to that right now. And again, Tracy will kind of give you some updates on the financial piece of that. So that's kind of it on that front. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this kind of piggybacks on kudos to this guy over here and his crew. Couple of issues in the north area of our service, northern part of our service area in the last couple of weeks. We've had a few leaks up there, and it is a challenging place, a challenging shutdown. I was shocked actually when I got the message that the line was already recharged again. Very, very impressive. It is something that we're looking at. I think it's an opportunity for us over the next year to probably do some really refine the planning that's already gone on for our pipeline replacement and improvement program. Again, they did some good work back in 2018 that kind of took a look at the district did, risk and consequence in that of our pipelines, which was a good starting point. We now have 5 more years of data. So we'd like to integrate some of that into that plan, and also really get operations into that plan. So Chad and them have a pretty good list, priorities. I think there was, 20 some odd pipeline breaches that had kind of been identified as priorities. But I think as we move forward kind of on both these fronts, even with the potential for some operational changes as we, move water a little bit different way, I think we're going to be looking at kind of strategically doing those replacements and improvements, also to help aid in that. So again, there's a lot of funds that are associated with that. So it is a long-term commitment that we have to make, but I'm willing to make it. And I know there's others. I know you've been very interested, Flint, yourself, in kind of leading, put in the charge into this pipeline replacement program. And it's probably one of the most important things we're going to do over the next decade. So anyways, the team is ready to get that going. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention. Obviously, we've got those the finances and the plan have to work together. So, so Tracy's going to kind of lead us into that too, how that works into that. But that's all I've got for today. This is week 3 for me, and it's been wonderful. The staff is as advertised. Just a really, really good group, and really pleased to be here. So that's it.
Well, we are glad to have you here. Thank you very much. Always sad to see somebody go, and I've thoroughly enjoyed working with Tom, and I think it is a salute to Tom that you do inherit the tremendously capable staff that we have
Mhm.
and the high morale in the organization. And I particularly welcome your comments about rehab and replacement. I was talking to Robert about that this morning, or no, yesterday. Because I had noticed from the texts that he's been sending out every week, which are very helpful, that we've had a number of main breaks.
Mhm.
And I know that we have spent a fair amount of time and money with reducing pressure. We've experimented with some lining. We did a long project on the wastewater side with lining, and Robert, I think, has conducted a couple of experiments with companies on lining technologies. I'm not sure they panned out, but we did some experimenting, and I guess I'm just really happy to hear what you just said, because I have been groaning a little bit
Mhm.
that we spent all that time and tremendous effort in the conditional use assessment to find out what all we had, or the use assessment, and the ability to score projects according to the need for rehab and replacement. And it seemed like somehow, probably because of a lack of funds, because these rehab and replacement projects are expensive.
Pricey. Yep.
There are. And probably what has happened is we looked at less expensive things to do, like pressure reduction, cathodic protection,
right? Hotspot.
and those are good things, but they
They
are, they're like little tiny universes that happen, and we don't address the big picture.
Yeah.
That we have a huge amount of very old infrastructure out there that needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and I guess this is something, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll wait until it's
Preaching to the
number
choir.
11.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
That's good.
I'll wait for number 11 to say a little bit more. So thank you very much, Jake.
You're
Look,
welcome.
committee. And by the way, I do want to say that I think it is really wonderful that Rainbow involves its ratepayers through these committees. I mean, unfortunately, you have not seen a great many of us here right now doing this, but I think it's really important that Rainbow solicits the input of the ratepayers. And I must say, under the previous administration, hope it continues, is that there was always a very open mind to getting feedback or offering ideas. As Robert says, some of us sometimes get a little crazy with some of our ideas, but we appreciate that.
Yeah.
As a ratepayer, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I hope it continues. I've also frankly enjoyed the opportunity to serve a little bit, but okay. Tracy, number 10, finance manager comments.
On that same subject, some of us looked at some software, a demo that I think it's called Withers Revenal.
Correct.
Is that correct, Chad?
Yep.
It takes that assessment study basically and puts it into a software that kind of heat maps and takes into consideration risk assessment and which ones we should be concentrating on replacing first. And the important part of doing that, rather than just having a big PDF, having it in software, is then we can get to the point where we have a number where what do we have to do just to get to a point where we're caught up and then replacing? And does that mean bonding? What do we need to do to get there? So I'm kind of interested in getting that software for the engineering team. I think that would be helpful.
Cool.
Also, the audit it went really well. It was a little bit more involved this year than in past years. I think that is a combination of a couple of things coming out of COVID. They are required to be a little bit more diligent because they went from being in person to then being remote. And so depending on the size of the district, sometimes they do have to come in person. We didn't have to do it in person, but we were subject to a lot more document production. It was, I think we provided over 600 documents. Also, the other reason I think it was more intense is that last year we had no audit findings and no off letter recommendations. So I think they were really looking for something this year. So far, they haven't found anything. I was trying to get it to this month's committee and board, but it was just too much of a push with how rigorous the audit was. So we're going to bring it to this committee in November and then the board in December, which is what we did last year. That also gives me just a little bit more time to go through the results and write more of a robust management discussion and analysis.
All righty. Any comments? Okay, we will move. Thank you. We look forward to it. And hopefully there will be no surprises. I do understand, having employed a lot of consultants in a prior life, I do understand the need for consultants to find something. I mean, it's like they just need to justify their existence
really
to
want it.
find something. And on the other hand, a fearless and deep look is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. And so it is what it is. And we have confidence in you, Tracy.
Thank you.
We know it's going to come out just fine. All right. Item number 11, committee member comments. Patty, you got anything?
No.
Chad?
Yeah, I never get to have a committee member comment at this one, so I'll seize the opportunity. Yeah, we are definitely interested in the software that Tracy mentioned. It takes that HDR analysis of the risk of consequence and the failure of consequence, and then puts it into an actual financial model and really helps us evaluate. And as Tracy said, it had this heat map indicator. It was cool. The demo was a great demo. Robert and Tracy participated. So we're working with that. And then as far as those pipeline projects, Flint, you and I, we've been talking for a couple years now. So I think getting this back up and getting queued in and putting detachment behind us will refocus, and the engineering department has been and continues to be ready to get these projects done. That's it.
Okay. And I will kind of pick up without trying to bogart the meeting too much. When we were evaluating the groundwater project, there was a clear, as I said at the board meeting, there was a clear implication that no matter how much grant funding we got, we were going to have to come up with millions and millions of dollars on our own. And it just, it seemed to me like there were three options: midterm bank loan, very expensive, hard to do; increase rates, even though we did the detachment, increase rates to generate cash flow; or three, long bonds, which are now, they're up to about 4.8, I think, in the treasury bill market. I don't know what you get in the private market. And I guess, given that our economists indicated that under detachment, the project just didn't pencil out, but the fact that we were contemplating being able to raise that much money leads me to think about the opportunity cost. If we can raise that much money for a project that we have decided to step away from, I know we haven't formally, but
Sure.
seems pretty obvious. If we had this, we're prepared to do it, can we not employ the same funding capacity to get much more aggressive about our rehab and replacement? Because I am very concerned about that aging infrastructure sitting out there that basically we've put some Band-Aids on and we've rubbed them gently and massaged them, but we haven't really gone in for some serious surgery.
I can answer that one. I actually do not feel confident that we could come up with the funds to come up the millions of dollars for that groundwater project right now. I think in 2 years, once we've seen our reserves build back up and the compounding effects of the rates that have an effect on our reserve levels, and maybe 2 to 3 years down the road. That's the other reason why I want this software, so that right now we can start preparing for what that plan would be and what that number would be. Because right now we don't have the number and we don't know, we don't have the ability to get that kind of funding right now.
So you think our balance sheet just would not allow us to participate in a long bond market? Is that your view?
I don't know the number right now. We need to get the number first.
Yeah.
But my feeling is it's quite large. And we have some other priorities with detachment and the pump stations, which I'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
But I do think it's something we need to start thinking about for, 2-3 years down the road, doing a long bond for infrastructure replacement and really get caught up on our pipeline replacement.
I think at that meeting, we pretty well shelved that project. We are going to, and not to burden, and I think this is where some of that opportunity kind of lies too. Don't really want to burden our engineering department by continuing to kind of force down that road. I think we'd rather have them focus on these replacements, pipeline replacements, and what that program looks like. I think in the meantime, we have identified a couple of grant funding opportunities, but those take, again, that's a year, 18-month kind of process before you even start to see those things, the actual contracts come
Mhm,
back and
mhm.
and those kind of things. So I think the small push will just be, hey, maybe chase some of these grants, just because there is so much money available for water supply projects. But it doesn't mean it's going to make sense. So we're going to inch forward on that one, but I think the focus, for the engineering team in that is going to be more so on the kind of these hard infrastructure projects. I think it was beneficial to do that project, take it as far as we got. Obviously, we got great economics out of it. Also defined a potential groundwater right? This return flow, it's been quantified, and that's very beneficial, because whether you do your own project where you're building brine lines and potable water lines from here to Oceanside or Fallbrook or wherever it is, or partnering with somebody because you've identified those, those rights, and those importer rights are very strong, actually, when those return flow rights. So a lot of benefit, I think, out of that project, but I think moving forward, yeah, it's not going to be the top shelf, but we're going to keep inching the grant funding piece. That'll be about it.
All righty. Item 12, which I found very interesting. Tracy, I enjoyed your write-up. Cash reserve policy 5.03.220 compliance report.
I have a presentation for this one that Ahmed's bringing up. Choosing a clicker for me. All right, so every year following the completion of the audit, we are required to bring the cash reserve policy to the board. So that's what this report was for. But as part of that, I wanted to go through where we're at mid-year. So some of the successes that we've had since we last met. LAFCO voted for the detachment, so we're hitting the gas on that pretty hard. And we're starting to see the effects of the 5-year rate increases that went into effect July 1st. Some of the challenges we're seeing is July through September sales are the lowest we've had historically. So it's requiring us to take an early review of the mid-year budget adjustments. And then also we're pulling in some capital spending on the detachment from fiscal year 25 to 24. So I kind of want to go through both of those with this cash level report. So these are our cash balances by fund for fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. We ended the year with about 18 million in cash. Last year was about 21 million. We have pooled cash, so all this is in the same account, but we do account for it separately.
So we're 3 million down, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So these are the target reserves that we set with the cost of service study. We set this first year at trying to get to the minimum level, and we're going to be at the ideal level over a 5-year span. Now, what's a little bit different is in our admin code, we do operating minimums at 2 months less the cost of water. Now, that's just not a sufficient operating reserve. So what we did with the cost of service study is we set it at just a flat 2 months of operating expenses with the target to be 3 months. And then the water capital minimum is 1 year of the 5-year average. So our plan is to get to these target levels over a 5-year period, and that's what the rate study covered. So this shot right here is the operating and debt service fund balances for the start of the year. You guys have a copy of this in your packet as well. So we started out the water operating at 6.4 million. We budgeted a $3 million surplus. Now, the reason that's important, that is what we set our rates to. That's also the amount that we plan to transfer to the water capital fund. So watching where our sales are through the year are is really important so that we maintain that surplus so that we can fund the capital plan. You can see the wastewater operating is the next column over, followed by the general operating fund, the amount we keep in there to cover 2 months of operating expenses in case of any of an assortment of emergencies that could come up. For example, during COVID, we had the inability to shut off accounts or do collections. And then we've got the new water sources fund. We have about 200,000 that goes in that per year. You can see I have a reduction on there as well. That's for two things. We're looking at filling up a gap in the water capital plan with some of that excess funds, and also it funds the water study. And so we'll see that on a slide coming up.
Have we, Tracy, I'm really glad to see that you are reallocating the new water sources.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that, because if we're not chasing that, we could put,
Yeah, it's something
and one of my
else.
questions was going to be, where would you put it? Would you spread it across the others? Would you find the one that needs the most? Or since it was a water thing, it would go
It
to
should stay
water
with water.
capital, and that looks like you're taking it to water capital, right?
Yes.
And is the 200,000 just to cover the remaining invoices that we have on that project?
So if I go back, see the 200,000 is a positive there.
Yep.
That's just that gets automatically funded every year with some property tax funds. So it will still keep going in there and building up if we want to use it for something else. I mean, it's not a very strict new water sources. I mean, it could essentially just be another reserve fund, or we could eliminate it when we redo the admin code for reserve levels.
Okay.
Something different.
All right, great.
So with water operating, we are budgeted at 12,700 acre feet. As I said, July through September is the lowest on record. And if we mirror the rest of this year, say last year, then we'll come in at about 10,000 acre feet. If we do the average of last year and the year before, we'll still hit the 12.7. Right now, we're in the crystal ball period where we don't know where it's going to land. So we're being really proactive. We're looking at operational budget adjustments early so that we don't have to be reactive in January. So some of the things we've identified to fill the potential operating revenue shortfall is continuing to leave that engineering position open. We have had some unbudgeted revenue, about 400,000 for capacity fees, because we don't budget those in since the developments slowed down so much. We also looked at some different department level cuts that generally don't get completely spent from the budget, things that we could easily delay. And then also looked at cutting travel and training by 50%, which a lot of departments don't spend all of their travel budget. So these are all things that don't necessarily affect the operational or the employees. It's not something that people really see, but it's things that if we start to do now and talk about as a management team, we can do them with a little pain. So by doing these budget adjustments, it keeps that $3 million transfer intact from the operating to capital, which is really important to fund our capital plan. Okay, we're switching to capital now. So I'm going to talk about wastewater first. We have the one project, the Thoroughbred lift station. We had budgeted $5 million for that. Not all of the budget money was spent last year, so we're rolling that over to finish out when we come to the board in August with our budget adjustments. We're going to ask to roll that amount over. So that would be about 0.6 million. Okay, so for the wastewater capital fund balances, we started the year with $1.6 million in wastewater capital. We got that $2.5 million from Citro. Last year, we got the $8 million. So that was the final payment from them. We did the debt financing of $5 million. And we have that grant coming this year of $1.6 million. And then also we've budgeted in about $600,000 transfer from operating reserves. Actually, it's going to be from the operating surplus this year. So that leaves us about just over $11 million in funding for wastewater capital. We have the $8.6 million in spending for the Thoroughbred lift station, which will leave us with $2.6 million in wastewater capital. which is sufficient for wastewater. We don't have any projects planned for year two. That $9.5 million potential financing we see in year three likely won't be necessary because we did the 5 million instead. I leave it on there because we had it in the cost of service study. Okay, this screen is just showing you the balance of the wastewater capital and operating as a whole, 3.3 million in there. Okay, now we're going to transition to the water capital projects. So this screen has only the projects that have a budget in this fiscal year. So what we've done here is we've looked at what was unspent from last year and determined what the new proposed mid-year budget will be for our projects. So a lot of these projects either went up or down, depending on if there are areas where we could cut back a little bit. And what's driving that is our pump stations, the 600013, about a third of the way down. The budget this year was 6 million and we had 4.5 million in next year's budget. We need to pull that into fiscal year 24. So what that does is it really increases the budget for this year for water capital, but it brings it down quite a bit for next year. It also creates a little bit of funding shortfall for this fiscal year 24, which we're going to see in the next screen. Notice on this, we had started with a $9 million capital budget for water, and we're going to propose moving it to almost 15 million at mid-year. So that 14.9 you'll see on this water capital funding sheet. We started out the year just above $5 million. We have that $3 million transfer from operating on here. The 1.6 million from the new water sources gives us $10 million in potential funding. That 14.9 million from the previous screen is here, which you can see leaves us at a projected deficit of 4.8 million at the end of fiscal year 24. That going into the next year, because of compounding rate increases, we plan to move 8 million over, and you can see that things improve over the 5 years, but it does create a problem in fiscal year 24. So if you pull that into the next screen, looking at all in for water capital and water operating, we are flush. We have with the 6.4 million in operating, it offsets the deficit in the capital fund, but it still leaves us significantly lower than where I would like to be. You can really see in year 2 and 3, those rate increases start compounding. You can see we start funding the rate stabilization fund in year 3, and things look a lot better in the long term. But I have a little bit of concern about the fiscal year 24 balance right there. So with the water capital budget, what we don't have factored in here is the $7 million potential savings from the detachment. It's unknown when that'll start. We don't have that factored into fiscal year 24. Could start as early as late calendar year 24. We also have our detachment payment that's going to be due, which is 15.7 million. That's not factored in here. Now we have our agreement from LAFCO is to pay it over 5 years at just over $3 million a year. And so one thought we had is maybe debt finance that and also fill that gap in the capital fund. So I was looking at debt options at 20 million and what that would do with our debt coverage ratio. Currently coming out of the rate increases, our debt coverage ratio is 3.8, which is really good. That means that revenue less our expenses leaves us enough money to pay our debt payments 3.8 times. Have a AAA bond rating, it requires a 2.0. If we were to consider a $20 million loan over 10 years to match that $95 million savings, our debt coverage for the first 3 years would be about 1.82, which is still really good. So that's one option that we're looking at. That is in consideration of the new rates and maintaining that $3 million operating surplus.
What about longer than 20, longer than 10? What about
So the
20 or 30?
The reason I went with 10 is because I can go to just the regular finance markets and not go out for a bond, which would take considerably longer and it's considerably longer to secure. but I do want to look at that also. 10 years just seemed like a reasonable amount of time to factor in different things that could affect the $95 million savings. I mean, when you get past 3 to 5 years, there's so many unknown unknowns. I just felt like 10 years was a really conservative approach. Also, we have a lot of our debt that'll be paid off around 2029. We have different loans that are coming off the books. Ideally, I'd like to not have any debt financing, but as long as we can keep it paid off in a shorter term, then we could maybe look at in 5 years at doing a longer term bond with the infrastructure replacement. So that's all I have. Do you have any other questions? Do you want to go back to any of the slides?
I have a couple. And I may be mixing apples and oranges here.
It's a lot.
And I also recognize that maybe some of this belongs in an E&O meeting and not in this meeting. So, you know, I don't know. I'm looking at the wholesale water efficiency capital project budgets from what was presented to our committee in May of this year.
Right.
And when I'm crosswalking that group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects over to this list, I'm seeing that several of them, some of them are missing. They're not on
So-
here.
So
And
I just put on the list for the presentation, the projects that had either an approved budget or an adjusted budget in this fiscal year.
I understand.
We did pull the money from lease down to the pump stations because that's where we need to be focusing our efforts on, and maybe Chad can speak to this also. Those projects are still in your finance packet,
Mhm.
because it has the 5 years of projects. I just wanted for the presentation purposes to show just what we're concentrating on for this fiscal year.
I appreciate that. But my question is still the same. We borrowed money to prosecute those projects, right?
Right.
Okay. And if we are not prosecuting those projects in the near term, are we basically using the money we borrowed for other purposes and we're going to sort of rob Peter to pay
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, I do think that that is the case because we did have some water capital projects that went over, for example, the Rice Canyon pipeline that went over. It's indirectly related to providing water to the district as far as being able to concentrate on our northern connections. However, it wasn't identified directly on the wholesale water efficiency list.
Mhm.
So yeah, some of the funding has paid for other projects.
Yeah, also, Flint, if you go back and on that list you're talking about from May, it'll have the Morrow pump station project, it'll have the Wilt feeder line.
Yep.
All those ones, those when we reassessed on the whole, specifically on wholesale water efficiency, those were either, Weiss is on kind of an indefinite hold right now, matters outside the district's control at this time. And then the Morrow pump station, the Wilt feeder, and a couple others were deemed more nice to have, whereas project number 600013, that Hutton, Rancho Amigos, Turner, Denver, the pump station project, as Tracy's saying, that's where we're focusing. So we're still using that borrowed money on wholesale water efficiency. We're just on some of those projects that are nice to have, they're not must-haves, we're reallocating.
Right. We are spending just over 11 million on those pump stations and the financing was for 9.7.
I see that. I mean, I absolutely see that. 1.5 plus 6.4 is, 11, almost 12 million. Yeah, I see that. I see that.
And I pulled.
And
I pulled funds
that's
from-
okay with the bank?
Yeah, the bank did not attach to specific assets for that loan. They did that 5 million for wastewater. They did come out and do an inspection on the thoroughbred station and specifically tied the loan to that.
Right.
No, they did not. It's just basically our.
So this is essentially unencumbered money is what, from a legal perspective, it is not
We are
tied to
spending-
anything.
we could still prove that we spent it on the pump stations.
Okay. Not that I think a bank is going to come running after us. I don't think so, but I'm just. And so the idea is that some of these, what we used to call the ROI projects, some of these are just going to disappear into never land. Is that basically what I'm hearing from you, Chad?
No, Those
No.
will come back in future fiscal years. So the Morrill pump station.
That is what the long-term plan showed back in May, is that they would appear out in 25, 26, right?
Yeah, if you pull attachment B from our finance packet, I think it's one of those that I gave you there. It has them out in years 2 through 3. So fiscal year 25 and 26.
And that's what was shown in the May presentation as well.
So
Okay,
we,
so the
we-
plan is still to chase those out there, right?
Right.
correct.
Okay. And we will have to come up with our own indigenous funding for that because we will have used up the bank funding by then.
We will, and we'll have significant reserves and be able to fund the water capital projects a lot better in those out years with the rate increases
Mhm.
compounding on each other.
Mhm. And related to that, you scared me when you said that we may not be seeing the benefits or the implementation of detachment showing up in the price we actually pay for water until the end of calendar 24. Is that
I'm gonna be ecstatic if we get it in 2024, but I'm very conservative and I don't want to promise that we're gonna see it in January of 2024 when maybe it's not until June. My hope is that it's January and that's a possibility, but we don't want to factor that into our projections.
so if the thing passes the ballot in November,
Under
Then-
promise, over deliver.
Yeah, obviously if the vote passes in November, certify the election in December. The one pending issue is, got the ongoing litigation between County Water Authority and LAFCO, which were named. There are things happening there in closed session that we can't really speak to,
appreciate that.
but that's where that stands. But we're optimistic.
If in fact we did get the benefit at some point, what is your take on the annual, if we did not lower rates, if we just kept the rates the way they are, but we harvested the savings in the water cost side? What kind of annual contribution would that make to the water capital program? What kind of
So-
augmentation?
So
would
for
we
the
see?
first 5 years, if we spread that $15 million payment over 5 years, the first 5 years, we'd see about 4 million. After that, closer to 7 per year, $7 million per year.
That would keep the boys on the other side of the fence busy, wouldn't it?
That would make us all very happy.
Music to my ears.
Okay. We could probably have much more conversation about using that money to fund financing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but that's another conversation. And
We could look at a
I'm
lot of
still
different
focused
things.
on long debt. That's where
We
I'm
could
at.
look at paying off our shorter term debt and looking at longer term debt for the infrastructure replacement kickoff.
I know that people are uncomfortable with the current state of interest rates, but when we look back over the last 30, 40 years, the fact is that interest rates are still,
Still low.
they're low.
Yeah.
They're low. And long debt at 4.8 is not a bad deal. But you said you were going to look at that. So I'm going to shut up.
Want to go into long debt until we've done more of an in-depth study on what we need and what our plan is going forward with infrastructure replacement.
I like the midterm debt. I just worry that it's expensive because we have to pay it so fast. We have to pay the principal down so fast. But that's another story. Okay, I quit.
I'm done with this.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So what I'm seeing here, Patty and Chad, is that we have a draft of a calendar item for the board, which is, are you asking, or is this informational, or
Yeah,
are you
it's-
asking this committee to take an action?
So if it's action, it'll be board action. This is just board information. So,
Board
and
information.
I
Okay,
always like going through the presentation with this committee for feedback and
cool. Cool. Yeah, I should read. It does say board information. I mean, that just is very plain. So,
Okay.
duh. Okay, thank you very much. Next item, and this is asking for the committee's recommendation, is item 13, discussing and possible action to approve a bill adjustment for account number 0184120-000 for amount of time a construction meter was not being used from October of 2022 to present, and to waive the late fees. So fire away.
So this is a construction meter, which is a meter that goes out for temporary construction sites and is used until they have a permanent meter. The customer has said that they called and asked for the meter to be picked up. We couldn't find record of that, but we did pull the usage and found that they hadn't been using it from, it looked like September and through the current month that they wrote us the letter. So it seemed reasonable to credit them for the monthly charge and the late fees for that period of time. However, staff doesn't have the authority to do that. So we're bringing this to the committee and the board to ask and recommend that we credit this customer. Normally, we would notice when a construction meter is just sitting and unused, but this was prior to a change in procedure. So now this is unlikely to happen again, but this is one where we want to give them a credit. Or we're recommending that the board authorize a credit.
And I'm noticing from the meter reads that the last time there was any significant use on that meter was in June of 2022. And does the waiving that we are proposing to do go back to then, or does it go?
I was actually wondering on that. They said they called in, I think we did it all the way back to September because there was a couple of units used here and there.
Okay.
But it was still a significant write-off of the balance.
Anybody have any questions? Patty?
No,
Nothing?
no, you don't want to take it up to June?
I'll look at that. I'm wondering if maybe the amount in here is June, but I'll double check it and see.
Well, I'm looking at, I don't know what attachment this is, but the reading date, it says that in June, they used 50 units of water.
That was the reading for June. Yes.
Right.
But
So
maybe July 1 forward.
Right.
I'll look at that and maybe adjust it up for the board recommendation.
I would go with that. I would go with that.
so that might increase the total amount being credited back then, Tracy.
Yes.
But staff's recommendation is still the customer claims that they called for a pickup. For whatever reason, it wasn't picked up. And they're asking that since there was no usage from that time, that the operation and maintenance fees be waived. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was one unit used in the billing period after June 16th and one unit, so that's 742 gallons,
48. Yeah.
48
Yeah.
on over 2 months. It's it's not much water. So if I'm hearing this correctly, would it be safe to say that the committee would recommend that finance take a look at what the starting date was for the credit and to take into account that, clearly should be no credit for anything prior to June 16th, 2022. But if the credit was going to take place after September 14th, whatever that, that reading where there was a one, that maybe we sort of look past the two ones. Is that what you're thinking, Patty?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And so I think that the motion before the committee would basically be to support option 3, which is to provide other direction to staff with a view that we are generally supportive of the credit. We are just asking about the starting time on the credit.
Right.
Dawn, how do I make that into a motion?
You would make that a motion saying to adopt staff recommendation option 3, and then I'll include the direction that you specify
Okay.
in
so
the
there's-
motion.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, Flint moves and Patty seconds that motion. And so Dawn, you'll do a roll call?
Member Nelson,
Aye.
member Townsend Smith,
Aye.
and alternate Williams.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy customer.
Great. Okay. Next, item 14. Discussion and possible action for a variance request for customer credit for the difference in account class rates from September 2020 to November 2022.
Okay, so this one is a customer who has called us numerous times. They bought a 9-acre property and they are requesting that we retroactively change their and credit them for a change from ag to single family residential. This is a matter that has come before the committees and the board in the past, and it's something that past practice is not, we don't do it. Because we would have everyone coming in, wanting to switch or change something in the past to get a credit back. So what I did on this one is I went back through all the call recordings to see if they had specifically asked in the past to change rate classes, just to make sure there wasn't something that we had missed. There were calls, just different calls about questions, leaks on their property. They did not understand that the irrigation pipes were their responsibility and that our responsibility was everything up to the meter. Questions on what O&M expenses were, and the staff did a really good job of helping them with those questions and recommending a downsize because their usage was significantly less. But what they had said is that they had purchased this property and they weren't sure if they were going to use it professionally or not. They didn't know what they were going to do with the property. So what we don't actively go out and look at what customer usage is on properties and recommend a specific rate class because some customers stay on ag because the rate isn't subject to restrictive water cutbacks during a drought. And then sometimes they're just not sure what they're going to be doing with the property. Now, the previous owner did have high usage, so ag made sense for them. Again, they hadn't stated if they just were going to become a professional grower, and the district just really doesn't have the staffing levels to go out and interview all the customers or ask every customer that calls in which class they want to be on. However, we did give them a recommendation to downsize numerous times because of their size. Or because of their usage. And they went through just different options with them and encouraged that. So as I said, in past practice, these situations, we have not granted retroactive credits just because of the risk it would bring up in having everyone want to do that. Or, people could be on one size of meter and then say, like we should have gone going back a year or 5 years, or it just would really open up the floodgates to a lot of adjustments.
I personally can't speak for Patty or Chad. I personally support the staff's recommendation because I just keep reading on every phone call. Downsize options were discussed, offered information on downsize, discussed rate options with customer. Staff offered downsize options. I am assuming that all of those were attempts by the staff to tickle the curiosity of the customer to be able to say, I would like to do that. And I was not reading that as telling the customers that they need to downsize their lateral or downsize their piping all over the place, but rather to downsize their rate class. That's the way I was reading that. Am I reading it correctly?
Yes, and then another call that was pretty early on in their purchasing in the property, where there was a discussion about the PSAR options as well, and they were sent the information on that. Their letter, it does state that we have an obligation to tell them what their options are, but the district sends out information regularly in newsletters, in rate notices, all sorts of communication. And on top of that, we sent them separate information on the PSAR options and different rate classes.
And we clearly discussed downsizing options on all the phone calls. I mean, so you lead a horse to water, but I mean,
And we are planning to put this in our newsletter for November, just, to get it out there again.
again,
So,
okay,
yeah.
all right. So, is there a motion?
I will make the motion to recommend to the board to staff's recommendation of option number 2.
I'll second that. Dawn?
Member Nelson,
Aye.
member Townsend Smith,
Aye.
and alternate Williams.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, review of the board monthly finance report.
So the packet I gave you today, we've really gone over it in condensed form in my presentation, but it does have all the details of the potential changes for capital in here. Also on the front page, you can see the significantly lower sales for September fiscal year to date compared to the last 4 years. It's 30% lower than the lowest of the last 4 years. So,
Wetter and cooler. That's what we've had, right?
yes. But
I know I've constantly manually adjusted the irrigation at my house for my own landscaping. Just noticing what the weather is doing and constantly tinkering or turning the system off for a couple of days because it just didn't need,
Yeah.
And if I'm not buying water, because I'm not very conservation minded, I just kind of
Right.
go. And if I'm not buying water, then there's a bunch of people out there not buying.
yeah, so 3 months in looking at that and making a plan, I think is very proactive and we are on top of it.
Okay. Are there any items of note? This was not in the packet that was on
No, we
the website. So I don't think it's likely that we're gonna go through all this. I mean, a lot of it is stuff. Oh, I like this comparative water sales year to date. The trend is down. I do. Let's go to attachment E.
E,
E. You know how we constantly ruminate a bit about how our ag water sales are falling off, right?
mhm,
And what I see is that for the first two clumps, AD and AG, and I know what those are, what I see is that actually our ag water sales were significantly higher than in prior years.
no,
The gold line is this year, right?
wait, which page are you on?
Attachment.
Attachment E.
Okay, so I don't think that is what you're seeing on this. Go to the page before that.
Right? This page?
I'm a numbers person, so.
Oh.
600 ag domestic this year,
Mhm.
last year 858.
So you're
So
thinking,
ag here 831, last year 1379.
so you're thinking maybe these two are wrong, because what this would imply is that our water sales to ag,
Let's look at the key over here.
That's-
Fiscal year
yeah.
22. That does not look right to me.
you can
No,
see why
I
I'm
think-
confused.
Yeah, that doesn't look right.
Okay,
I never look at the graphs.
okay. It just does. It just looks from the graph like had this huge increase in water sales for the gold year compared to all the other years. Now, a huge increase on a very small base may not mean much, so it could very well be that it's the rule of small numbers. I don't know. Chart just caught my eye
Yeah, let me look at that. The others are,
because somebody on the board might see it, Trace, and maybe you might want to make sure it's.
I definitely.
Cool, cool, cool. Okay. Because you're right, the other data does not tend to support that. Okay, I got you. I got you. Okay. Anything from you on all this, Patty?
Well, it does look like, because that's fiscal year 22-23, right? The gold,
Gold? Yeah,
fiscal year 22-23, and it does look like fiscal year 22-23, the ag sales were up compared to
Oh, you're right. That's
21-22.
four.
So that's not this year. That was actually last fiscal year, which was very dry.
the year that ended at
Mhm.
June 30th, right?
Yes.
22-23,
I
yes.
actually think it's correct.
It's just 23 is not 23-24 is not shown on here.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you.
So obviously heavy response to the weather, both ways, both directions.
Okay. So we did item 15, review of the monthly board finance packet. Thank you, Jake, for
Welcome.
that. Yep. Okay, so list of suggested agenda items for the next meeting, assuming we're going to have a meeting in November.
Oh, yeah.
Audit,
We're gonna talk about the audit.
audit.
To you.
Anything else?
Probably talk about where sales are at.
Okay. Assuming that we have some conversation in the engineering and operations committee next month about the rehab and replacement thing. And you said you were going to look further at financing options. Is there any chance that we could have a little bit more conversation about what you're seeing and finding and
So what I'm working on is just a request for proposals. It doesn't commit the district to anything. It just is a write-up on what the situation is and putting it out there now. Because there's going to be interest rate hikes coming again. We might as well get an option on some different
Okay.
loans, and so we'll probably talk about that as well. I think our meeting next month is the 14th.
say that again?
Our meeting next month, I believe, is the 14th. So
Yep.
I was gonna put out the proposals to be received by the 10th.
Okay. Okay.
We could look and see.
All
what-
right.
what
So,
the options
and
are.
these are basically mid-length financing.
10
okay.
years.
So I'm just, I don't know how else to say it. I'm going to be a little bit of a dog on a bone about this, because it is important and I feel like we have lost some time. And so it doesn't matter. It's not a pejorative thing that it's someone did something bad that we lost time, but I just feel like we have not made the progress that we should have made on this.
Mm.
So whether it's in this committee or the E&O committee, I'm gonna be a little bit of a dog with a bone, wanting to see if we can stimulate, even if we can't do a huge, vast smorgasbord. Is there one project that we can take on in the near term? Can we come up with $2 million to do a rehab or a replacement as we look at financing a bigger buffet of projects? Okay.
Fair enough.
I'm just going to be a little bit of a push and,
Okay.
please forgive me. Okay. All right. So I think we are at adjournment. We did it in 1 hour, Trace.
Oh,
Even with all that stuff we talked about, we did it in 1
Wow.
hour, huh? All right, QED, let's quit and eat dinner. Okay,
Thanks. Good stuff.
you bet. Thank you, Patty.
So Flint, I'll send you the tour information.
Yep,